Hello, everyone, and welcome to the About Healing podcast. This is a show created for those on or awakening into their spiritual journeys who are ready, wanting, and learning how to heal themselves. I'm your host, Sheree Buckman, medium and spiritual healer. Join me as I share my unfiltered perspective in healing, creating a place of love and understanding for all, reminding us that we are in this life together and never alone in our struggles. To learn more about me and my purposeful work, visit my website at shereebuckman.com. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of About Healing podcast. Oh, what a morning.
It's been an adventure.
Yeah. You know, as we described in the past episode, we do like to talk a lot before, and I just found out one huge pet peeve of Miss Copper. And I'm going to share it. I'm sorry. I love it because it's so stuck in there. Don't mess with Copper's Turtle Sunday.
Exactly. Just everybody mental note that right now.
I know. It means nothing to anybody. Everyone's like, really, guys? Really? Why are we talking about that? I'm just saying, for a future note, if anybody knows Copper or ever meets Copper, don't mess with her Turtle Sunday. All I'm going to say. Unleashing the beast.
And my husband's going to listen to this episode and be like, really? Really? You had to share that?
Guess what? I didn't say who or what it was about. I just said don't mess with her Sunday.
He would know. He would know. But he should know by now. I was going to tell you anyway.
And now the world knows. Okay, that's funny because the world doesn't listen to this. It's just the listeners. Okay. And so let's bring it back in. Welcome to the energy of our day.
Good luck with that.
I know, right? I do want to really put a shout out to all of our listeners and followers, especially on our social media, for being patient. Thank you for being patient with us with the social media merge, with the new branding and everything that had been released recently, because we did have a separate account for About Healing Podcast on our social pages, but with my own purposeful work page and that it was just way too much. So we actually are blended them together. For those of you who do not follow About Healing Medium, that's where you're going to go now to find all the podcast information. That's where we're going to upload episodes. This is where all the healing guidance will be. Freebie Fridays will be on there. So everything related, everything is going there. So it didn't disappear. You can just find it now at About Healing Medium on Instagram and Facebook.
It really just got to the point that we needed to simplify it for you.
Yeah, it was a lot of work trying to post things and putting it in way too many places, too much energy. And so, no, this has been really good so far. And really, I hope everybody enjoys it too. So thank you
And
for
it's
your patience.
beautiful. It's beautiful. Like the new look is just gorgeous. So
Oh, thank you. You know, and as I mentioned before, if you all noticed the new logos with the colors and the shift, it was something that I created. And it's a feeling when from within, the energy that I feel for myself. And so I really wanted to make it a personal image in connecting with all this. So that's kind of the expression of it. Enough about all that, our funny, quirky stories and, you know, social media merges and all of that. I do want to go ahead and get into our topic today. With the last couple of episodes, you know, we have gone really deep. So in our last episode in Transitioning to Light, I spoke of when the soul transitions or when they leave the body, they separate from the ego. And so I really thought it to create an episode talking about this ego. What is it? What does it do? What's the whole picture and idea of it? So I really wanted to get down and talk about that this week in this episode. And so to begin this conversation, I want to talk about what I call ego-based consciousness. What the heck does that mean? That's a really big fancy word, I know. But this is about the human-based experience. This is what that ego-based consciousness means. Okay? We all have this ego. We all have it. It is essentially like our autopilot setting. So as we're living our lives in the everyday lives of eat, sleep, work, repeat, this is kind of like the autopilot and how we live. This is doing the basic functions, and it's almost like our default setting. And in this setting, this is where we hold judgments we have for other people. This is also the judgments that we have for ourselves. This is where we hold fear and shame and guilt, the need to control things, the need to control people. This is about the questioning of self. This is also the wanting or needing to take power from other people, or the superiority, whether you feel superior or inferior as a whole to everyone else. This is all part of that ego based, and this is all part of that human experience. And I want to explain that being in the ego itself is not bad, because the ego is also survival. The ego is also about understanding and setting healthy boundaries for ourselves. It's about filling our needs. It's our drive. To say that someone has an ego, we all have egos. There are just different levels to it and how we are living or using or expressing it. And so the autopilot setting, as I expressed, was that ego-based consciousness. But there is another way or button, essentially, that when we choose to, or we come to a place where we are recognizing this, it's like we can go in now, and we have to manually go in, and we have to switch off that autopilot. We have to manually go in and do that into something that I call the awakened consciousness. Now, the ego is still there. Again, we don't disconnect from that until our soul leaves the body, leaves the physical plane. But the awakened consciousness is just about understanding our soul selves. It's coming to that place of understanding that we are not human with a soul. We are souls having a human experience. It's like this change of perception. It is this new awareness and understanding. So again, it's going in there, turning off that autopilot, and then getting into the driver's seat, essentially like our lives. Okay. It's about taking control there. It's about taking responsibility. This is such a big word when it comes to our lives, when it comes to really anything that we talk about. And we talk about healing, when we're talking about switching into ego-based to awakened consciousness to changing the world, is about taking responsibility for our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And that is the awakened consciousness. And so within that too, it's beginning and understanding and seeing the bigger picture of seeing outside of our daily lives, of our own personal goals, of seeing that and now seeing how our actions affect others. It's coming to an understanding that our thoughts and those emotions and those actions that we do make, it affects so much more and so many more than just our immediate household or the people that we're immediately involved with. It's an energy that creates a domino effect that other people feel, because energy is felt and it keeps going. And so, again, it's coming to a place of not seeing people as separate, meaning I am not separate from my children or my husband. I am not separate from my friends. I am not separate from my neighbors. I am not separate from my enemies, which I personally don't have enemies. Whether anybody chooses me that way, I don't know. But what I mean is coming to that understanding that we are all connected by light, because when we take ourselves out of that human experience, and you can see the underneath, because we are made of light. The soul is made of light. The soul does not have genders. The soul does not have a defining feature that separates us like our human experience does. When we can come to that understanding, that's part of the awakened consciousness. And we know that we are connected by that light and by our experiences, because what we go through and what we experience creates a cause and effect everywhere around us. And it goes so much further than you can imagine. And so as we get further into this topic, I want to talk about the lessons that I've learned from Spirit and about the ego and understanding, especially the transition of becoming aware of the ego-based consciousness into the awakened consciousness. Because it's a lot for your brain to understand and shift, because we've lived on this autopilot for a very long time, like our whole lives, into a point of coming to this understanding. And with that is massive shifts. We have to shift now into a new awareness. And so just to kind of get into the basics and to kind of help you through this, especially with the ego, because a lot of people struggle with that, thinking that the ego is bad, or that thinking about yourself is selfish, or because you've done something on an ego basis some point in your life, you feel shame or guilt for it. We shouldn't. But because here's the thing, we learn and we grow from those experiences, and that's okay. Here are some of the things that I've learned as I went through and still go through my process of this, of shifting that ego awareness, of going into the awakened consciousness, is the first one is to become familiar with it. First of all, you can't understand it or you can't change things or shift perspective when you haven't really looked in and dissected it as a whole on your thoughts and how you think or how you project or how you judge, because it's these things that we need to become very aware of. So it's to sit there and ask it, ask yourself, ask that ego in you, ask it, especially when something happens that triggers you, that causes that judgment to come in, or that causes a heightened emotion to come in. It is to ask that feeling if it's coming from egocentric place or from a place that is protecting yourself for your best interest. And this is a place where you have to be honest, and it's okay, especially when you're just opening up and you're starting to pay attention to this. It is okay to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I was having this feeling because I had this feeling of superiority, or I didn't feel like I was in control and they're not doing what I want to do. So I had this feeling or this judgment. You know what? Just becoming aware. That's great. That's fantastic, because now you can go through the new list of how can I change this and how can I shift that thought energy while also going down under and understanding that trigger itself, because we need to dissect the trigger too. What causes me to have this judgment? Keep going, keep going, keep going, because we judge others as a reflection of our own fears, of our own unresolved issues that we have deep down and internally. And then it's sitting here to start to question, what are my ego tendencies? What is it where I tend to put a lot of judgment on? Where do I always or seem to try to exert control or take control? Or that feeling where you always feel like you have to be right, talking to this one person or on this one subject or whatever it is. And you have this urge and you have to prove a point. What is it that causes you to have to do that? Or gossip. Do you have that tendency to gossip and tell other people's business to somebody else, which is also a deflection? Just putting that out there to be familiar with that. Could your tendency be like that needing to know everything? Whether it's needing to know other people's business or needing to be aware of what's going on in the news. Those are ego-based tendencies. And so it's really going in and pulling that out and trying to understand it. The next lesson to understand, the next lesson to learn is that it is not our responsibility to judge or change others. I think I had to stop here for a second, because the moment I said that out loud, I almost felt like it shocked maybe a couple of people. Like, whoa, what do you mean? Or maybe it's just hitting you for the first time and thinking about the judgments that you carry, that we all carry. But we have to understand, first off, that everyone is learning their own lessons. Maybe, yeah, you're in a place where you can see through whatever the action is, or the way someone else thinks, or the way they process things, because you've already learned that and you feel that judging them or putting your information on them and trying to change them out of that is helpful. But when you're pushing it and they're not ready to receive it and they're not in that place, it does more harm, whether it is to the relationship or their own process to learn the lessons for themselves. We have to allow others their time to learn and to understand these lessons for themselves, even if it means them falling down and having to experience the harder stuff that comes with it. Because think about it, some of our strongest qualities and some of our biggest lessons have come from the toughest situation. And so sometimes we have to allow others to fall, to pick themselves up, to fully learn that lesson on their own. And that is why it's not for us to judge someone else going through their lesson, because maybe you already learned that, but they didn't. So let's not make it tougher for them to learn and understand it. It's to share that compassion and be there for them if they ask for it. That is another thing that is also under that it's not our responsibility to judge others, is that unless someone is in a place to take responsibility for their thoughts, actions in life, you cannot say or do anything to change it. This just goes with that last one I was just talking about. But you can't. If they are not ready, you cannot force it. And so in here, I actually want to share a personal story. It's a challenge I had with this. A good portion of my life, especially getting into my adult life, I had a really hard time understanding this concept with one of my sisters. No matter what I felt or saw or just knew what could help her get out of a situation or a thought track, or if she was making bad choices and in my assumption, bad choices, whether they were or not, the more I pushed to try to lecture or trying to ask, why are you doing this? Why are you making these choices? The bigger barrier I put in our relationship, to a point where she would never talk to me about anything big happening in her life because she was afraid of my judgment of it. And I, in the back of my head, had always said, and I even said it out loud to her, and she always told me, I remember this, she always told me, I don't need you to be my mother. I need you to be my sister. And the way that I told her was, I am being your sister. I'm trying to protect you and I'm trying to help you and I'm trying to get you to understand this. That's how I, to myself, put it. Like, I didn't think it was judgment. I'm like, well, I'm not judging you. But I really was. I was telling her that the things that she was doing was not right, or the things that she was doing was quote unquote bad or irresponsible, or fill in the blank of one of those terms that go with it. But in recent years, when I started going through this process for myself and understanding and taking responsibility for my actions, for my thoughts and my words, I finally understood what she meant, because it was not my responsibility to change her. And I specifically told her at one point, because I finally came to this awareness for myself and I was prepared that she had to live her life for herself. And she always told me that when I would tell her, if you do this, this is going to happen, because it happened to me. I experienced it and this happened. And she always said, but I have to experience it for myself. And of course, that part of me being the big sister who is, I have this really good relationship with her. Why would you need to go through it when I'm telling you exactly what's going to happen? Like, this is how it's going to make you feel. Like, why would you need to go through it? I'm telling you. And it was like, no ifs, ands, or buts, but I have to do it my way. And you know what? She was right. She was absolutely right. It took me a very, very long time to understand that. And I take responsibility for all those judgments and the words and the fights and her disconnecting from me and not trusting me with the deep stuff because of that. And so one day I had the conversation after I decided to I had that acceptance, and I told her, from now on, I am not going to give you my input or my thoughts on things unless you ask for it. I want you to feel safe and I want you to feel comfortable in sharing things with me. That moment, because I wasn't saying empty words, I meant it. I really did. And it was a practice. Trust me, it was a practice for myself, because I had to break this old habit. It was a habit, and I had to break the old habit of stopping myself, of wanting to put this input that, even though I felt and I knew it wasn't my place, because she didn't ask for it. And so it wasn't mine to give. And if I really felt something that could be helpful, I asked her if she wanted to hear it. I would say, I have some insight on this, or however I wanted to put it. And I asked her, would you like to hear it? And she would either tell me, yes, go ahead. And she either took it or didn't take it, but I said it. Or she's like, no, I, I don't want it today. And you know what? That was okay. I was practicing my listening skills with her. Because even though I may have good listening skills with other people in my life, there's something different about our relationship. And mostly with sisters, when we're used to, I don't know, being brutal with each other, or just really honest, or, we don't have boundaries. But the point of this is that I wanted to share with you that, like, I have these issues too. And I took responsibility for it. And to this day now, oh my goodness, we always had a good relationship, but we have a great relationship now. And now she calls me and just tells me everything. And no, I don't always have something to say about it. And you know what? Oh my goodness. It's a shout out to her. And I couldn't even begin to tell you how insanely proud I am of the amazing person and the choices that she makes. And I can't sit here and say like, "Oh, that's because of me." Like, it's because I told her, different things. No, but now she feels safe to make choices on her own. And I think that's where it's at. I gave her her power back, and she's amazing, and she does the work for herself. And so there is more than one way to do things. And she didn't have to do things my way or how I saw it. She did things her way, and she does. And she's doing amazing. But I had to come to a realization and take away my control and take away my judgment that she could live her life for herself. So when we are talking about this, especially about the judgment thing, and in this part, it is our actual goal is to be able to observe without judgment. That's the goal. As an evolved being and or as a heightened being, it is to be able to watch and observe without feeling one way or the other about it. Just seeing it as someone else's experience and not holding a judgment for it or not to have an opinion. And when we're talking about it, and these are the big things, we're talking about race, sexuality, other people's beliefs or religion, or raising children is a big one too. People have a lot of stuff to say about that, judgments. Um, Diet and eating habits, and et cetera from there. These are all examples of the things where the big, heavy judgments come from or go to. And so the next lesson is to be honest with yourself. I know I had mentioned that a little earlier, but I want to separate this and go into it just a little bit more because the key to this is to be honest with yourself. Because in this, there is no room for shame or blame. Shame is to bring it on eternally by feeling bad about the thoughts we've had or the actions we've done. No, don't feel that. Or blame is by not, that's the opposite of taking responsibility. Now you're pushing it outward and trying to make it somebody else's fault for the way that you think or the way that you act. But it's not. You have full control of that. And you have full control over this too. The past brings us lessons. There's no shame. Again, and if you feel shame because others have made you feel guilty or putting that on you, remember this. They are definitely still in the ego-based consciousness because they're reflecting that judgment onto you and you start to feel it. But when you get into the awakened consciousness, you also become to an awareness of not allowing other people's judgments to affect you. Because again, now you know how this works, that their judgments are a reflection of what's going on with them internally. And so now we begin to look at that like, okay, this person that used to affect me a lot by their really heavy judgments or they put their blame on me or bringing shame or guilt or some of those other big, heavy emotions in or feelings. And now you can kind of cut that cord there and understand that it's not yours to carry. It's not yours to carry. And while you're being honest with yourself and understanding your ego, you also have to know that it's okay to put yourself first. Absolutely. That's the great part about the ego is about survival. And that's part of survival. It's not just physical survival. It is also about mental health survival, emotional survival, is evening the playing field for yourself and taking that time out when you need it. It is not a egocentric thing to take care of yourself. It's not like what people call it, like, that's your big ego, You're thinking of yourself first and taking care of yourself first. That is only out of balance when you're doing it for low vibrating reasons, like for control and things like that. When you're giving up all of your responsibility to put yourself first to gain something bigger than someone else, that is a low vibrating reason. But when you're doing it to even yourself out so that you can survive life, that's a good thing. That's a positive survival trait. And that's what the ego is used for.
I think I have used this before way back in the beginning of the podcast, but when we talk about this particular thought process, it always reminds me of when you're on an airplane and are like, if we lose pressure and the mask drop from the thing, always put your mask on first so that you can help others.
Absolutely.
And the reason why they say that is because you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of
Mhm.
others.
Yeah. How can you be responsible for other people or really your own life
Right.
if you haven't taken that time out or do the things you have for yourself? Because guess what? No one's getting taken care of if you haven't done it for yourself. And you're right. So there was
Right.
an episode earlier in the season where we talked about this. You can only give what you have. And if you're in a place where you have given everything and you have nothing left, therefore you have nothing left to give, not even for yourself. And so that is why it's a positive thing. And it's a survival tactic where you do put yourself first. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. Again, the difference is because you're not doing it to put yourself above others, putting your needs above others. This is a very simple, this is a necessity. This is, again, that survival of taking that time out in whatever way, shape, or form that you need to re energize. The next lesson is to give up control. What I mean, and that's ha 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 ha. So I just triggered myself right there. That's a big one for me. Control, control, control. This is one of my big personal life lessons. Is about not trying to control the outcome or life or being prepared for everything. Because sometimes we need to go with it, including this, including the ego, including the shift from ego based consciousness to awakened consciousness. Because when I started learning and understanding this and being aware of my ego, I was like, okay, well, what can I do to control this? I need to shift this now. I need to watch out. I need to, okay, we're going to prepare. I can do this, this, and this. These are my reminders. And then it definitely brought me to this lesson of understanding that, okay, whoa, slow it down, that it is okay to stumble and fall while you are working on this because you have to break these old habits, ways of thinking. This is a lifetime of habit. This is a big one to shift to. And no matter how long it takes you, that's okay. Because when it comes to this, especially when we're talking about the ego part, that you will never fully control it because you're always going to have it. This ego is part of, again, this human based experience. It doesn't go away. We're not going to control it, but we're going to be aware of it. And we are changing our perception of it. And we are making shifts and changes within it. So we are not going to control it, and it is not going to control us because now we're in the pilot seat now. We turn that autopilot off, and now we are doing the work. And so when we do the work, it's also the dirty work of bringing in that, again, that last one we were just talking about, but that honesty, of being honest with ourselves in it. So just being aware of the changes we have to make is just powerful. And we don't have to have a plan, and we don't have to have this schedule of control and manipulating it and trying to create a new autopilot. We don't have to create a new autopilot of trying to make it more positive. Like, oh my gosh, I did have all the judgments. I don't want people to think that I'm this judgy person. Well, it's just, they're not. It's one of those things. You just roll with it, make the changes, and then guess what? It does change little by little. And so the last lesson within this, at least that I have for you today in this topic, is to understand that balance is the key. It's the balance of the ego. It is to make sure that you're checking in often and you're being honest with yourself. Yes, I'm repeating myself there again because that is important. And then it's becoming aware of knowing when to tune in and adjust it. And that's usually when we find those triggers. It's that one person or, okay, this is a great example. It popped into my head because I know because it's talked about all the time. Think about, I almost feel weird about talking about it, but think about going into Walmart. I think this is a great example where people, when you're in a place, when you're bringing a lot of different energies or vibrations, I'm trying to find a good word for it, and people going through a lot of different lessons. Let's go there. Lessons. Okay. In the past, yeah, I've totally had this and standing in line and seeing someone in an outfit that's like almost outrageous. And you're like, what are they doing? Like, how could they? I would never. And oh my goodness, how dare they? Like, those are judgments. Like, that's not for us. This person is standing there, and if they have the confidence or whatever it may be, you know what? Good for them. It's just
That's something that has always bothered me.
what, going to Walmart? Oh.
No, well, yeah. No, how, the mentality of
Mhm.
judging people like that, I don't know. I just everybody wears different shoes, literally and
It's
figuratively,
true.
and I think that it's invasive to judge like that, so I don't
And it
know.
is. But again, it's not to have that harsh judgment for yourself either because you've had those judgments, that you've had it for other
Yeah.
people, or to judge someone's appearance or their weight or their lifestyle, or, again, fill in the blank. But the more aware you are of the triggers and those thoughts that you have, especially when you're out and about, and just like, again, like for me, I remember because when I was going through this initially, when I was becoming very aware of my thoughts and these judgments, even just the little ones, because even I feel like for a very long time, I've been in a place where I've never really been, especially really in my adult life, to be one to talk badly about others. I have, especially in the more recent years, because I have an awareness that people are going through things that we don't understand. And it's not for us to talk about because gossip is one of those big things that goes along with judgment. Okay. This is that ego based. It is not our job to define someone else. We do not understand what they have been through, what they've gone through in their life, and how they process. Because I will tell you, even with my social work background, and I worked in child protective services, and let me tell you, it's that big question like, how can you treat children in this way? How can, or why do, or that's a big trigger. And guess what? That's my judgment. But what I learned from all this was, especially when I'm talking about the example, like in the social work aspect, that like the parents or the people that treat children badly, it is part of the lessons that they've been learning through their lifetime. They never learned how to parent. They don't have those tools or haven't been giving them. It's not something that came up common because they grew up in a place where this was the example, or they have such deep trauma that it triggers out and comes out in that way. It is not for us to judge it, not even the extremes. All we can do is work on our own judgments and our own thoughts and behaviors and things of that nature. Because again, there we make sure as we are taking responsibility for ourselves, we show others how to take responsibility for themselves. And that is a huge domino effect we do want to see, where people stop blaming others or stop or hiding away their deep emotions that come up and explode in different ways. It is our healing. It is the balance and control. It is understanding and responsibility, but it is also, again, just like in two episodes ago, we talked about channeling the pain. It is also about processing our pain to heal ourselves and to inspire others to do the same. And that this is a part of that. This is like another little like onion layer is this ego part. And so I just want to be clear here as when I just gave these examples, especially since I just talked about the bigger extreme behaviors, thinking about child abuse or um, these really big intense behaviors that affect others in very negative ways. Know that we're not giving excuses. By understanding this is not an excuse, and no, we don't turn a blind eye to what they're doing, because they're learning their lesson. That needs to happen. No, they haven't taken responsibility. So sometimes we do, as a society, need to intervene and make sure that responsibility is taken and that we're making sure people are safe. Okay. So just want to find that line. But again, hurt does not equal hurt, is what I mean. And to break that down means just because someone hurt someone doesn't mean they have to feel the same pain as their punishment. Sometimes we need to teach. We need to get down and let's fill in the gaps of education so this doesn't repeat. And we can continue to inspire so less of this happens because we are making more positive choices with our own thoughts and our own actions. And the more we do that and more we take responsibility shows others that they too can and need to take responsibility for theirs. And so, whether you are just learning about this, that there is a change and a transition or a shift within ego, coming from ego based consciousness and moving into awakened consciousness, or if you have already been working on that, or whether you're in a place now of this awareness and, still daily practicing and checking in and tuning in and making those adjustments where you need to. Either way, I'm just hoping by hearing this and putting this all together, it starts to make a little bit more sense. And I want you to understand, and everybody out there to understand, that you are not alone in this, and you should not feel shame if you've still been stuck in the ego based consciousness. Trust and feel that the reason you're listening to this now, you have been guided because it is your time to understand this, and that maybe it's your time to find that autopilot button and to switch it off and to jump in the driver's seat, that you are piloting your own thoughts, your own emotions, and your own actions. Because this is where we take responsibility. And this is where we begin to shift our life and bringing it to a place of more love and leaving that higher vibrational trail for others to follow. Whether you're in this work of helping others and healing others, or whether you are a parent and you want to leave that trail for your children, your grandchildren, and further generations down the line, or with your friends, coworkers, or really consciousness in general, because this work does leave a ripple effect. It's nothing you can see, but you can start to feel, and this is how we start to change the world. And seeing less and less of those not taking responsibility for themselves. And it starts with us. And so that's enough talking about the ego, or my ego, your ego, our ego. No judgment. Thank you for listening. This was an interesting topic. I'm happy to share this because it was something I went through too and still work with every day. We're never out of it.
Unless if you are out of it, it means you have passed on. And at that point in
You've
time,
disconnected. So on point. You are so
yes.
right. Therefore, we don't have to worry about the ego anymore. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Until next time, be kind to yourself. With so much love and gratitude, I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode. My hope today is that the message continues to guide you along your path to healing. You can find About Healing Podcast on Pandora, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, or any of your favorite places to listen in. Follow and share the podcast on Facebook and Instagram, where you can find healing guidance, quotes, tips, insights, and chances to win free stuff. To ask questions or share comments, email me at abouthealingpodcast@gmail.com, or feel free to always reach me on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, be kind to yourself.